salawat, please.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط والمستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you to Ali Imran for inviting me to deliver this talk. He asked me to talk about leadership in Islam. My name is Hassan Shiko. A few disclaimers before I begin, as always. Number one, I'm not a scholar, just somebody he invites to talk. And so I do learn along with you when I do my research or just ponder over the various things that Islam offers to us. If ever you need to get in touch with me, that's my email address, and my YouTube channel is also there for you on the screen. Now, leadership is, as you all understand, a vast topic, and then leadership in Islam is quite complicated, as well as it would take a long, long time. Now, I've been asked to talk in only about 30 minutes. I may just about make it. If I don't, please do bear with me patiently, because I would like to finish my talk today. I'll try to be as fast as I can. Now, as I begin, I've got a question that I'd like us to ask ourselves. Do we consider Islam and Muslim to be the same thing? It's something I want you to ponder, to think about all along as we go through this talk or majlis, whichever way you want to put it. Please note, my question is not whether Islam and Muslims should be the same thing. My question is, are they the same thing? Right. A gentle reminder about a verse from the Quran, and it's like all other ones, this one as well is my favorite. And it begins, it's there very much at the beginning of the Quran. Alif Lam Mim Zalikal Kitabu La Raiba Fihi Hudal lil Muttaqin. How we quickly flit over this, how we quickly move over this verse amazes me, myself included. I'm not on any moral high ground or a high horse. Alif Lam Mim translation. This is the book whereof there is no doubt, a guidance for those who are God conscious. So we need to let this settle in, make it part of our flesh and bone if we're Muslims. Obviously, if we are not, that's fine as well. I mean, that's an absolute choice you make. La ikraha fid din. There's no compulsion in religion. So that's also Islam. But if we are, as Muslims, going to go by this book, then we have to know one thing about it, and that is that it does not have any doubt, or it does not have a paradox or a self-contradiction. Now, why do I stress on this? Maybe I'll spend 40 seconds on this. It's because I'm talking to the scientific community. I believe a good majority of you are academicians and are working in various universities as scientists and researchers. So you are pretty familiar with academic approach to things. And I would like us to approach it from this point of view, either as Muslims that we claim ourselves to be, myself included, then either we believe in the book because it's one of the principles of our belief, or we simply don't. But if we are to go by our belief, then there is no doubt in this book, because otherwise I often hear that There is a conspiracy, and then there is a conspiracy theory. Now, I will venture, and I'm going to venture to state in the following way. I don't mean, or I don't intend any blasphemy. And because I'm talking to academicians or researchers and highly educated people, I'm going to venture into it with an academic approach. So either this book is full of conspiracy theories, or it is one that has no doubt. So that's my second thing I want you to bear in mind. Let's proceed from it. Now, we've all heard about Satan, and a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you are very simple, because that's how I think I was taught to learn Islam in a simple way. It might suddenly sound simplistic, but let's see if it is. And second, I believe that because of the great complications we have, often we need to find a solution. So often we find that the solutions to big problems lie in pretty simple solutions, really. So what I'm going to share with you is not anything new. You've always heard it, you know it better than me, but here is something for us to focus on. Satan, who is he? What is he? And what did he do? We go to Surah Kahf, which is chapter 18 of the Quran. It says, verse number 50, we said to the angels, bow down to Adam. So they bowed down, except Iblis or Satan. And it goes on to say, what did he do? He defied the command of his Lord. The verse continues, will you take him and his offspring as lords or allies and protectors instead of me, capital M, being Allah here, reference. When they're an enemy to you, evil is the exchange of the wrongdoer. So we have two questions answered here. What is Satan? He was of the jinn. And what did he do? He defied the command of his Lord. Let's proceed. Okay. Now, a book is only as good as its conclusion. And let's also consider that in its present form, that we have a tangible form of it. The Quran is a book that is tangible. And so it is only as good as its conclusion. Let's go right to the last chapter of the Quran, chapter number 114. And what does it say? Surah An-Nas. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer who whispers into the hearts of people. And let's go back to the first one very quickly. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind from among the jinn and among people who whisper into the hearts of human beings and even jinn. Okay. A book starts with saying it does not have any doubt. It goes right to the end and it's conclusive, as it were, or last chapter. And it says, I seek refuge in Allah from the whispers, the evil whispers of the jinn. Whoever does that, let's find out. Who whispers in the hearts of men and jinn. What does Satan do? Because if he is there, he's not sitting idle. Let's go back to verse number 50. We said to the angels, bow down before Adam. So they bowed down except for Satan. He was of the jinn. Okay. So I seek refuge, going back to my previous slide. I seek refuge in Allah from something who is from among the jinn and among people. And then I also read something else. What does Satan do? How does he operate? There's the question. If he exists, how is he operating? He is doing the following, according to the last chapter of the Quran, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer. So he whispers. In other words, in Urdu, we have the word waswasa. From the whispers who whispers into the hearts of men. So somebody is doing something, in other words, somebody inspires mankind and the jinn to do some things that are not good. So if we are to go by this book that says, in this book, there is no doubt, and then we also read the following. We ask ourselves the following question. Does Satan have operatives? What does that book that has no doubt in it, what does it say? Again, in verse number 50, Surah Kahf. We said to the angels, bow down to Adam. So they bowed down, except for Satan. He was of the jinn, and he defied the command of his Lord. Now, Allah asks us the question, will you take him, that is Satan, Iblis, Azazel in English, biblical name, or the original name, Azazil, and his offspring as lords? Now, the Quranic word for offspring is zuriya, that's been used. So now this book that claims that there is no doubt, in which we as Muslims believe as a principle of faith to believe in the book, is saying Satan, the jinn, has offspring. Conspiracy theory or Quranic fact? Question mark for scientists, for academicians, for people who are highly well-educated and learned, and they're Muslims and believe in the book, question. Now Allah goes on to say, instead of me, do you worship him? When they're an enemy to you, you also read a similar verse in Surah Yasin, where Allah says he's an open enemy to you. Yes. And then Allah says another thing before he closes this particular verse. Evil is the exchange for the wrongdoers. Now the topic is about leadership in Islam. I've tried to establish very quickly the time that I have, that while it's a complicated subject, this book that has no doubt in it is also telling us that there is Iblis, Satan, who exists. He disobeyed Allah and he operates. How does he operate? He inspires, whispers, and all of that in the hearts of men and jinn. And he has operatives. In other words, he has a progeny. He has his associates. And the Quran is telling, it's according to the Quranic fact, that we human beings do, whether we are in whatever position in the world, somebody out there is his ally. Some bodies are his protectors, or they propagate for him or operate on his behalf, protectors of his plan that the Quran mentions. I don't. And Allah clearly says evil is the exchange of the wrongdoers. Here he's implying that we do exchange that then, which is why those who do it are evil mongers. Now, do we have leaders who do that? Have we had leaders who have faltered? Interesting. Now, those leaders who falter, who do wrong consciously, because the Quran is about the conscious human being. I mean, in terms of responsibility. So leaders out there, contemporary ones, in the recent history and in distant history, have they ever got inspired by, or have they ever faltered because of the waswasa or the inspiration by Satan? Question mark. Okay. What does the next verse in the Quran say? In the same chapter, verse number 51, Surah Kahf. I, Allah, did not call them to witness the creation of the heavens and the earth, nor their own creation. What does Allah say? I do not take misleaders for assistance. And if you look at the coloring there, it means that those who may be either the offspring or the inspired by Satan would be misleaders, and Allah does not take them for assistance. Now, let's think about it. Allah is absolute. Does he need assistance? The Quran is saying it. I've not used any hadith. I don't think I'm going to be using any hadith in this because I want to keep it as pure as possible, as it were, with the Quran only, because a lot of people say the Quran is sufficient. Okay, let's talk from the Quran. So here Allah is saying, I do not take the misleaders for assistance. Let's read it as is from the Quran. For those of us who can read, for those of you who can read Arabic very well or well enough, you can see what it is saying. Verse number 50. I don't think I have 51. Okay, that's we can pull it out, but you can do some homework as well yourselves. All right. But let's go back briefly here. And I do not take the misleaders for assistance. This means there are leaders who mislead and they're not Allah's assistants. And there are other leaders who are on Allah's side and Allah takes them for assistance. Now, as a Muslim, my job, my business is to realize, find out who those leaders are. I want to ask myself, do I want a misleading person to lead me? Or do I want a rightly guided person to lead me? Now, if Allah says that, it also implies that there must have been arrangements made for the right kind of leaders there for us to lead to the right path, because I just recited a few minutes ago Surah Hamd, in which we ask Allah as a prayer to guide us to the right path, not of those who have been who've experienced his ghazab, but those who are blessed. I'm using very simple words as best I can for even myself to be able to follow myself. Okay, so here it is in the Quran, the word Zuriya being used and his offspring. So it's straight from, as authentic as it can be. Satan has operatives, not a conspiracy theory. Now, this is the second part of my presentation. And we're very proud as Muslims. I often hear a lot of people talking about the Khilafat-e Usmania, the Ottoman Empire, and how it were the glorious days of the Muslims. I don't doubt it in many a way. The effects of the Ottoman Empire was that it was one of the largest empires the world had seen. The effect was that they had Muslim rule over lots of territories of Europe, effectively east and west of Turkey. And the golden age occurred during this time. So these were impressive feats, F-E-A-T-S, feats of the Ottoman Empire, the Khilafat-e Usmania. We are often very proud of this. But my question is that if you've noticed my asterisk on my slide, it was the expansion of Muslim rule and territories. The question is, was that Islamic rule and territories thereof? I mean, we can have Muslims ruling. Even today, we've got Muslims ruling in 50 plus countries or nations that were carved out for us. Are they Islamic? In a similar way, let's go back into history and question ourselves whether what we have out there that we claim to be Islamic, was it really Islamic? Because here's a very interesting story it was for me. I'm going to share it with you. In 2018, I got the opportunity to go to Kosovo. There's a university I was invited to deliver a talk, and I hadn't done my homework. I usually do when I go to before I go to a place, I find out a little bit about it so I can know my way around. But I just packed my bags and flown to Kosovo. And there's a place called Mitrovica. It's one of the major cities there. I'm relating it with this, the Ottoman Empire. Please bear that in mind. I was surprised, and I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. I was surprised to find that the city is literally, Mitrovica, is literally divided. In what way? There is one side that is the Christian side, or the Orthodox Christian, or the Catholic, but it's Christian. And the other is the Albanian Muslims. So we've got the Serbs on this side, and we have the Albanians on the other side, literally divided by barricades and sheets of metallic sheets cutting the city in half. So as I was walking down the street, there was this gentleman's statue. And obviously I must be respectful because they respect him, and he is, they call him the Prince Lazar Hrebeljanovich of Serbia, former Tsar of Kosovo. Apologies to anybody who knows that language, Serbian. I'm not good at it, so apologies. I don't intend to insult. They regard him as a saint. He was, look at the words, I've put them on bold for a reason. He's regarded as a saint. He was martyred in the Battle of Kosovo during the Ottoman Empire, 14th century, while leading a Christian army against Ottoman invasion. Now, the person who was taking me around, or us around, the delegates there, conveyed that the Ottomans killed a lot of Serbs and other Christian allies. This is one thing that we don't seem to register when we talk about or listen to the greatness of the Ottoman Empire. We're very proud of the leadership. Now, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, if you really, again, I'm cutting down, if we really look at the Ottoman Empire and the Sultan's ambitions, they seem more to be territorial than Islamic. And that's why I ask you this question. They were Muslim rulers. Were they doing it for spreading Islam, or for their own glory, or for the glory of expanding the empire? Do we see any different behavior today? In essence, I'm not sure we do. So going back to this slide very quickly. Now, they've put this huge statue bang in the middle of their most important square or roundabout. Well, my point is, people don't forget. And the city is so divided. Yes, post-Yugoslavia, the breakup of the war in the Balkans in the 90s, long story, how it started, who stoked it, what happened. But the point is that these people, both the Muslims and the Christians, have a lot of grudge. I'm writing my PhD, and I'm writing a novel, and there is a chapter I've included, and I've called it the chapter of that title. The title of that chapter is Hate. There is, under the surface, below the facade, there seemed to me to be a lot of hate. Now, where did that come from? It came from the leadership that we are so proud of from many centuries ago now, that we today talk about the golden period of Islam in terms of the Ottoman Empire. But people have grudges, and we see that hatred happened. It came to the surface when Yugoslavia broke. So he's pointing to a certain direction. Again, I don't want to get into those details, but if you see a road going at about 12 o'clock, right down where you can, around the blue car, that road goes down to the Albanian side of Mitrovica, where there are barricades, and then you cross into. Unfortunately, I lost the picture for it, but this is the bridge that was built to, obviously things were destroyed, and so they made a bridge of peace. The European Union funded it. It was called the Mitrovica Bridge. Now, this is what you see as soon as you go, you take a little bend, and this is what you see. I've tried to make the sharpen the picture for you. The part that I want you to notice, you see the Muslim side of it. There are those the minarets of a Ottoman style or Turkish style masjid. This in the same part of the Albanian side of Mitrovica is the Church of Saint Sava. This church was destroyed by Muslims. Obviously, even the former Yugoslav people, Serbs, Croats, and the Muslims, they all unanimously say it's a very highly complicated affair, the Yugoslav situation that was and is. Nevertheless, we see the barbed wire around and this is not, I've not photoshopped anything. This is how I took the pic. It was, and I took the picture. The Church of Saint Sava was destroyed, plundered by Muslims. Now, the question is, the Prophet very clearly told us that we shouldn't do this kind of thing. Do not desecrate the places of worship and the revered peoples of other people and nations and religions. Keeping it very simple, but I'm basically just reminding you about these things. But we did this. Now, let's proceed. Okay. They began to rebuild the church, and you can tell it was literally plundered, burned down in the 90s, or sorry, early 2000s. And they're trying to refurbish, bring it back on. But there's a lot of, the atmosphere is still very tense. And I went in 2018. If you can try and tell that this church of Saint Sava was built in 1890, they've retained a block or any other block that they've been able to find, and they've retained the impression of 1890 on it. You can see it's very faint, but it's there. In other words, this church was there not in 1990. It wasn't there in 1914. It was there, built during the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottomans were in control of the city. So this is not something new. It had been there for more than 100 years, and yet what we Muslims did. Now, whether they burnt down our masjids or masjids of Muslims as well, you're not supposed to do that. There's a certain leadership that's amiss. The outbuildings were plundered as well. Now, their graves of their, what they call saints, were also plundered. When I saw this, I recalled, and with due respect to your own sentiments, everyone, but there we are. It's the majlis that I've been asked to talk in, so here we are. When I looked at it, it reminded me of Baqi in Medina. And I wondered, have we changed? In the early 1900s, the sacra, the vaults, the chambers, the burial places, the graves in the graveyard of Baqi in Medina, not far from the Prophet, where the Prophet's family are buried, his kin are buried, where his Sahaba are buried, his companions are buried. They were plundered. Just reminded me, have we changed? What leadership do we follow? Because the Prophet very clearly said, do not desecrate, do not, chase women, do not kill women, etc. Don't burn down trees, don't kill animals, that list of things that there is about the principles of war. Food for thought. This happened now, some 23, 25 years ago. In the early 1900s, same thing happened. 1400 years ago, thereabouts, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, when they want to bury him thrice, if I remember correctly, was his casket taken back because they've been firing arrows at his body, at his dead body. Between this time, during the Ottoman Empire, question is, did the Ottomans probably do anything different? Why do I ask this question? They don't forget. People don't forget. And that's why they have the Prince Lazar's statue bang in the middle. Remember every day, never forget. The thing is, we're supposed to be very close to the Christians and the Jews, but what do we do? Who do we follow? All right. So now here is a further question I have for you. Was it Islamic? Let's take the case of Khalid bin Walid. It's a case study. Let's spend some time on this. We know that Khalid bin Walid was a Sahabi, was a companion. He was a warrior. He was assigned at least once to be Hazrat Abu Bakr's tax collector. And it's very much there in lots of, forget the Shia books, it's in the Sunni books about what happened with Malik bin Nuwaira, who was also a Sahabi companion of the Prophet. So it so happened that Khalid bin Walid, or Hazrat Khalid bin Walid, is sent by Hazrat Abu Bakr to go and collect the zakat taxes. Malik bin Nuwaira says, no, I do not subscribe. I do not pay allegiance to this present government or Hazrat Abu Bakr's reign. Therefore, I will not pay taxes. Some such story. Bottom line is as follows. Malik bin Nuwaira rebelled. Khalid bin Walid, let me start again. Hazrat Malik bin Nuwaira rebelled. Hazrat Khalid bin Walid killed him for not paying taxes, but that wasn't enough. Hazrat Khalid bin Walid, on the same evening of having murdered Hazrat Malik bin Nuwaira, consummates his relation with the wife of the dead man. It's an authentic fact. It's there in books of the Sunnis as well, and a good majority of Sunni books. I ask us the following question. Was that an Islamic deed done by a Muslim? He did it, therefore was it Islamic? But Khalid bin Walid is Sayf Allah. Is that the sword of Allah, therefore? We need to be very careful about what leaders we choose to follow, because we end up subconsciously through generations doing what you've just seen in the pictures in Kosovo and other places in the world. That certainly is not Islamic behavior. So what is the Islamic way of collecting taxes? Let me read this for you, and I hope you'll continue to bear with me. It's a Sunday. I hope you will stay on. And I'll apologize to the host, Ali Imran, for taking more time. What is the Islamic way of collecting taxes? Go to them gently, calmly, and when you go to a village, do not ride intimidatingly. This is a paraphrase. Lower your head and slow your speed. Go to the place where they water the animals outside the village. From afar, when you see them, dismount. Look at them and say, peace be with you all. I come to you from the Caliph of the Muslims and ask if anybody has the due of Allah in their wealth. If they refuse to respond to you, turn your face, ascend your horse and go to the next village. Do not force yourself upon them, but if somebody responds affirmatively, then walk with him to his dwellings. Tell him to bring his flock. When he gathers his flock, tell him to split it into two. When he makes two parts of his animals, tell him to choose the ones that he wants for himself. The other ones, tell him to split them into two groups again, and then ask him to choose half of whatever he has split for himself. Then split them again and make a preference of the ones that he wants, and carry on in such manner until there is sufficiency for the due of Allah. Only then should you check it to see if it is worthy and ask the man, are you happy? Do I have your consent that I should take these away as the tax due upon you? If the man is happy, only then bring it back. But if the man is not happy, then mix the flock again and restart the process. Imam Ali alayhi salam guided his tax collectors to do the above. This is Islam. Question mark. What kind of leader should we follow? The one that misleads? The one that gets inspired by the misleader, who blunders like the way he did? Now, I could go into the details. He killed Malik bin Nuwaira, Khalid bin Walid did. Then they placed his head among bricks or whatever, so that they could put their cooking pot on it, lit the fire, cook their food, with his skull there burning under the cooking pot. Islam, sword of Allah. Now, that's the Islamic way of collecting taxes. So here is Islam. Kofi Annan, former, everybody's seen it, I'm sure, but here is one more time. Imam Ali alayhi salam instructed the governor of Egypt to rule all his subjects, regardless. I mean, that's a small word, A-L-L, all, but it's literally regardless of Christian, Orthodox, Jew, atheist, theist, Hindu, doesn't matter. Let the dearest of your treasuries be the treasury of righteous action. Infuse your heart with mercy, love, and kindness for your subjects. Be not in the face of them a voracious animal, counting them as easy prey. Malik bin Nuwaira, was he an easy prey? He may have been antagonistic. Okay, fine, kill Malik. Maybe that's the orders. But then what did you do with his wife? Question mark. Now, one could argue that he was simply following orders. Again, remember, I began that this is an academic discussion or a talk, and I'm speaking to highly educated people. So in an academic style of discussion, we allow ourselves to venture into saying some things that are not intended to offend. Now, somebody could say that Khalid bin Walid was merely following the orders of Hazrat Abu Bakr, who was the caliph of the time. Somebody else would argue, no, Khalid bin Walid, acted of his own volition. He did what he did of his own accord. It was an executive decision he took in the heat of the moment. Let's consider these two very briefly. If it were orders of Hazrat Abu Bakr that if somebody doesn't pay his taxes, kill him, then with due respect, that wouldn't be a valid Islamic instruction to be given to your soldiers or to your tax collectors. It would not have been a valid order. It would have been an invalid order. They were both companions of the Prophet. They knew a little bit of Islam more than anybody else. Number two, if Khalid bin Walid acted of his own volition, or made his own executive decision, Saif Allah. We've got to stand in one, we've got to take one position. Okay, let's say that it was in the heat of the moment, fine. After beheading Malik bin Nuwaira, There were other people around as well. Khalid bin Walid did not go alone. He had an entourage. The process of cooking food on his skull, heat of the moment, what he did with his wife that evening of the dead man, heat of the moment, Hazrat Abu Bakr's order, which one is it going to be? Kofi Annan has no choice but to say, this is one of the best instructions that you can give to your governors, to your leaders out there. Infuse your heart with mercy, as Imam Ali alayhi salam says, love and kindness for your subjects. Be not in the face of them a voracious animal, counting them as easy prey, for they're of two kinds. Either they're your brothers in religion, or your equals, or your partners in humanity. Now, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, what was his situation? Let's try and understand him. Why did he set off? He said the following: I intend to call for the good and to prohibit committing the undesirable, and to act in accordance with the conduct of my father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and my grandfather, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. What was that intention? To call for the good and prohibiting the committing of evil. This Islam is what he wanted to impose, or bring back rather. That was all it was about. Now, toward the end of my presentation or my talk, ask yourselves, Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, the son of Ali alayhi salam, and sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he sets off to revive Islam. What did they do with him? I'm sure a lot of you by now know the story of Imam Hussein. He went with 72 companions who could be as a fighting force, as it were, but i.e., in other words, men who could fight. There may have been about 110, 120 other people, which included men, women, and children. So of that entourage of about 110, 120, he had 72 people who went into the battlefield one by one. Obviously, at the start, it was in groups and then one by one, and they all got martyred. But what else did they do? Because Imam Hussein alayhi salam set off to revive his grandfather, our beloved Prophet's religion of peace. What did they do with him? This is part of a novel I'm going to share with you. But it is as if Hussein knows his hour has now come. He bids farewell to his family. From behind the awning of a tent, he hears a desperate voice call him out, Mola, Mola. Hussein rushes in the direction of the tent. Just then its flap flings open. Hussein sees his wife standing there. She's carrying a bundle in her arms. Rubab, what are you doing? Hussein says. Here, it's your son, Ali Asghar. What are you doing outside your tent? They fire arrows randomly. Oh, Imam. Ali Asghar dropped himself out of his crib when you made your call. What? The suckling infant dropped himself from his crib? Hussein echoes. Ah, even his baby has responded. Hussein holds his infant son, whose little lips are badly parched. He's not suckled perhaps since the day before. Or could it be two now? The enemy had cut off Hussein's access to the river, and now it is as if everything has run dry like the desert, like the hearts of Yazid's men. The legacy of cutting off access to basic necessities from the Prophet's household had only continued. The first time was when the pagan Meccan tribes had besieged Muhammad and his uncle Abu Talib, along with other Muslims, for 3 years in a box canyon that Abu Talib owned on the outskirts of Mecca. The second time was when Muawiyah bin Abu Sufyan had blocked access to the waters of the Euphrates at the Battle of Siffin near Raqqa to prevent the troops of Ali bin Abu Talib, Hussein's father, from quenching their thirst. Now in the desert of Nainawa at Karbala, Hussein takes his little Ali Asghar in his arms and starts to trudge towards the enemy lines. Omar Assad, what is the fault of this child? Hussein addresses the commander of the enemy forces. You may have your grudge and orders to kill me, but what is the fault of this child? He hasn't had nourishment for hours on end now. At least let him have some water to drink. There is still no stirring among the enemy ranks. Even their flags are still in the dead air. O people, do you who proclaim to believe in Allah and the Prophet have no humanity within you? Hussein says. Still, there is no movement from the enemy. Only Ali Asghar flinches briefly, perhaps from a ray of the sun. Okay, Hussein says, if you think I'll use this child as an excuse to get hold of some water for myself, here, I'll put him on the sand. I'll move back and you can come and give it to him yourself. The heat of the sand cuts through Ali Asghar's clothing. The baby begins to squirm. Some of the soldiers cringe at the sight. They lower their gaze. Others stare absently far away into the desert. Umar Assad notices their reaction. He gestures to Hurmala bin Kahil, his ace archer, to come forward. These soldiers might balk. I can't allow a mutiny to take place. Act now, he whispers to Hurmala. Meanwhile, Hussein cannot bear to see his baby contort on the sand from the heat. He lifts him up and cradles him in his arms. Do you people have no pity? Let at least the child have a bit of water, he says. Hurmala pulls out an arrow from his quiver. Calmly, he places it in his bow and takes aim. His comrades hold their breath, their eyes set in a hard gaze, blood racing through their veins. Suddenly, Hurmala lowers his arms. The troops around him wonder why. What's wrong with you? Umar Assad barks, shoot. Hurmala cocks his head, motioning in the direction of the tents behind Hussein. Umar Assad peers. What is it? Hurmala cocks his head again. The tent, he says. The woman. She distracts me. Umar Assad looks towards the open flap of a tent behind Hussein. Just then, Rubab retreats into the darkness of her makeshift dwelling. Just shoot now, Umar Assad barks again. Before Hussein knows it, the white bundle in his arms spurts. Thick blood sprays onto his face and chest. Hussein just stands there, stunned. Then the desert becomes a blur. When Hussein's sight clears, the outline of an arrow hung vertically in front of him becomes visible. His eyes trail its shaft downwards. A three-pronged dart designed to hunt big game is lodged in the left arm, neck, and ear of his little Ali Asghar. Hussein begins to tremble. Someone from the enemy lines shouts, Hussein, now why do you tremble so? Hussein looks towards the sky, his heart as if clamped and twisted. He looks down towards the earth. He looks at the child, and then again towards the skies. Now he wants to take a few steps forward, but is unable to move. This man of great resolve weakens. He drops to his knees. Why do you not move now, O Hussein? You've taken your Akbar and Abbas back to the tents. This one is but a weightless child. Hussein, his throat choking, mumbles, Oh man, do you not know he has a mother waiting for him? I promised her that I'd bring him back to her, quenched of his thirst. After alternating between consciousness and semi-consciousness for what seemed like an eternity, Hussein feebly gathers himself up. He looks at his hand. Blood is dripping from it. He looks towards his encampment. With the murdered baby held in his arms, he begins to trudge towards Rubab's tent. Abruptly, he stops. Then he retreats. Then he tries to advance again. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We are from Allah, and to Him is our return, he keeps uttering. Still in shock, his voice shakes, his tears stream. 7 times does Hussein advance. 7 times does Hussein advance and then retreat, reluctant to reach the tent. How can he now? But the inevitable must be ultimately accomplished. The baby's mother has to be informed. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have time for any questions if anyone has from the audience. So I will give opportunity to virtual audience first to write any questions they have